Good morning, fellow educators in the field, fellow researchers in the field of education. We are all convened virtually here at the Zoom platform for the 7th International and 8th National Teacher Education Student Conference, or more popularly known as TEStCon 2020. This conference is hosted by the Cebu Normal University College of Teacher Education with the theme, Making Education Sustainable in the New Normal. I am Mr. Kim Francis Rodriguez, and I will be your host for today's proceedings. Let us all pause for a moment's silence for the singing of the Philippine National Anthem and invocation. Both numbers will be led virtually by the Cebu Normal University Chorale under the baton of Professor Darlene Yap.
Ayang magiliw, perlas ng silanganan, alab ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyente ng magiting, sa manlulupig, di ka pasisiil. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong buhaw, may ilagang tulad ang sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kisap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagnidinig. Ang bituin na tarang niya kailan pa ay magdidilim. Lupa ng araw at ipagsinta, buhay ay langit sa piling mo. Aming ligaya na pang ay maapi, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Hello, good morning.
Morning. Kasi na good morning di ay.
Thank you very much, Cebu Normal University Chorale, under the baton of Professor Darlene Yap. CNU Chorale is the official singing ambassadors of goodwill of the university. Before we proceed, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to tell you some of the house rules that we need to remember for the jury. So here are our house rules. Number one, all is encouraged, or everybody is encouraged to rename their Zoom names according to this format. The session number, space pre if you're a presenter, or par if you're a participant, underscore your complete name. So for example, S1 if you'll be attending session 1, or S2, session 2, and so on. Space pre if you're a presenter, or par if you're a participant, underscore your complete name. Second, please turn off your microphone for the entire session. The chat box may be used though, for you to be able to communicate with everybody else in this session. You can also use the chat box later to post your questions to our speakers. And you may or may not turn on your video while the session is ongoing, but during the picture taking later on, the session moderators might be encouraging you to show your beautiful and handsome faces. Being a leading research university of education, Cebu Normal University's research culture has gone from meek and passive into active and productive. What might have been an area easily avoided by many has now become every normalized cup of tea. What was once a dream is now a reality. Today, here to welcome us all and to formally declare the opening of the TEStCon 2020 is the ever-dynamic leader of Cebu Normal University, who is determined to make this reality a permanent practice of CNU. Friends, please help me welcome our SUC President 3, Dr. Filomena T. Dayabil. A virtual round of applause, please.
The Vice President for Research, Extension, and Publication, Dr. Angeline Pugoy. The Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Daisy Palompon. The Vice President for Administration, Dr. Floriza Lapla. The Dean of the College of Teacher Education, Dr. Ethel Abao. The officers of the administration, the faculty of the College of Teacher Education, all the stakeholders of Cebu Normal University, participants. The response of Cebu Normal University to the new normal is not just to survive, but thrive in the midst of unprecedented changes in the educational landscape. The conduct of this year's Teacher Education Students Conference, or TEStCon, is a proof of the zeal of the students, faculty members, administration, and all the stakeholders of the College of Teacher Education to continuously contribute to knowledge generation and dissemination, despite the health crisis that the world is experiencing. The normal may be new, but Cebu Normal University remains steadfast in its duty to thrive, to lead, and to serve. With the theme, Making Education Sustainable in the New Normal, it is my hope that this TEStCon becomes an avenue that enables educators and education stakeholders to converse and share ideas, practices, and strategies to hurdle the challenges affecting education during and beyond this health crisis. This new platform may lack many of the actual experiences of an in-person conference, face-to-face interaction, expressive conversations over food, fresh perspectives that can come from simply leaving one's abode. Nonetheless, the safety of everyone is the utmost concern in using this online conference. It may pose numerous technical and organizational challenges. To our participants, you may experience some awkwardness, which include moments of less than optimal sound and occasional technical glitches. To the presenters, you might find it challenging to deliver a talk to a monitor instead of a live audience. But let us acknowledge and try to accept the new virtual realities of academic and scientific gatherings, for they offer opportunities, reaching wider and larger audiences, reducing carbon footprint of travel, and improving diversity and equity. May this conference rekindle the spirit of collaboration among researchers and educators in the country and the world to come up with answers to the difficult questions on sustainability, accountability, and quality in the new normal. In behalf of the CNU administration, faculty, staff, students, and the entire CNU family, I declare with pride the opening of the Teacher Education Students Conference 2020. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you very much, Dr. Filomena T. Dayagbil. Friends, this conference is a convention of student teachers, teacher educators, teaching professionals, and this is participated in by at least 300 participants. At the moment, we are 320 strong in the house, and at least 300 participants and presenters from all over the country. So at this moment, I'd like to acknowledge some of them. We have participants from Bataan Peninsula State University. Welcome to this conference. Cagayan State University Lalo Campus, Capiz State University. We also have Caraga State University, Cavite State University, DepEd Camarines Sur, Bicol, and DepEd Siargao Division. We also have participants and presenters from Eastern Samar State University, Maine and Borongan campuses, Isabela State University Rojas Campus, Marinduque State University. We also have from Philippine Normal University Visayas, Silliman University, Southwestern University Finma. We also have St. Paul University in Dumaguete, Sulu State College, Zamboanga State College of Marine Sciences and Technology. We also have participants and presenters from Butuan City, Bohol, Palo Leyte, and of course, from the host institutions, Cebu Normal University, Maine, Medellin, and Balamban campuses. To everybody, welcome to this conference. So once again, thank you very much, Dr. Dayagbil. Friends, to give us an inspirational message is the CHED 7 Regional Director. On his behalf, let us all welcome a CHED 7 Chief Education Program Specialist, Dr. Josefino Ronquillo. A virtual applause, please.
Hello. Hi.
Hi, sir.
Good
Morning, sir.
Hello, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
morning
Good
po.
morning,
Sa
sir.
lahat. Good morning sa Pilipinas. Good morning sa iba't ibang countries. And good afternoon and good evening to all other countries who are now watching to this International TEStCon 2020 of Cebu Normal University. Honorable G. Prospero De Vera III, Chairperson, Commission on Higher Education, Professor Charles E. Hopkins, and UNESCO Chair in Reorienting Education Towards Sustainability of the York University, Toronto, Canada, Dr. Filomena T. Dayagbil, the SUC President 3 of the Cebu Normal University, and of course, with the rest of the officials, faculty and staff and student body of the Cebu Normal University. Research presenters from the local and international research students, faculty, and of course their administrators. Friends, partners, good morning, as I said, in the Philippines, good afternoon, and good evening in the other side of the world for those participants from the international community. Of course, in behalf of Dr. Maximo C. Alhivi, the Regional Director of CHED Regional Office 7, please allow me to deliver this inspirational message to all who are here attending this TEStCon 2020, the 7th International and National Teacher Education Students Conference. I hope you will be inspired, not inspired. Joke. In a recent evaluation,
I'm sorry, Sir Jojo, you have been muted. Sorry, sir.
hello?
Yes, sir.
Bumalik na?
Yes, po.
Okay. So, in a recent evaluation on interventions done in the Philippines during the quarantine period, platforms such as Google Classroom, group chat, and the shared flexible learning environment, be it synchronous, asynchronous, teaching learning activities, and of course, using the internet and without using internet are the common interventions used. Other interventions used also are the radio-based, telephone-based, door-to-door delivery of lesson exemplars, and take-home learning and portfolio completion activities. With these modalities are really being used and explored during the quarantine period will serve as learning points for the implementation of the video education system. However, the challenge of technology access still remains special to the public college and university students as the special case because of some factors in which other factors such as the home environment, the conduciveness to learning, even the dogs barking and other animals surrounding home can be heard. So learner attitudes toward home learning and the technology competence can affect learning outcomes and the effective use of the blended learning. Learning at home being used up to now because we are not allowed yet to have the face-to-face classes or teaching learning activities. This also requires parent participation and support. All the above cited facts needs more impact analysis as to where we are now and what are the best practices we can proactively do to answer the challenges in instruction, research, extension, and production per se. As we are still in a quagmire of confusion because the perils of developments that struck our country and other parts of the world. Cebu Normal University, Cebu City is consistently embracing all the challenges manifested of its true notion as the center of excellence in teacher education and nursing education, a research university with its vision and mission to serve the poor community with quality education is now duty-bound to serve the populace pedagogically, andragogically, with the healthy minds and body of students. So, the collaboration and complementation from our resource speakers, research gurus, faculty, as well as students and participating higher education institution for the 2 days research undertaking led by the Cebu Normal University will definitely utilize the research outputs into referee journals and of course the Philippine ambition to climb into the ladder of producing more at high level in the wave of science or the WOS, Scopus or Thomson Reuters, and the ISI. The Commission on Higher Education is proud of that being the genuine partner for consistently did its task for more than a century existing as educational institution as Cebu Normal, and now with the dynamic leadership of Dr. Filomena T. Dayagbil and the rest of those officials, faculty and staff and student body, making education sustainable for the new normal, and that is Cebu Normal University. Thank you, everyone, and kudos to all. Yours truly, the person speaking in front of you, is Dr. Josefino A. Ronquillo, the Supervising Education Program Specialist of the Commission on Higher Education Regional Office 7. Thank you, and God bless, and keep safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sir Jojo, for giving us that wonderful, inspirational message. Friends, this conference is graced by the presence of expert speakers, cum researchers from highly respected institutions from the Philippines, such as the Commission on Higher Education and the National Committee on Cultural Education, and overseas, such as the Royal University of Phnom Penh, Kan Tuol Cork, and the UNESCO. Our plenary speaker will be properly introduced by the highly effective Vice President for Research, Extension, and Publication of CNU. Friends, please help me welcome Dr. Angeline M. Pugoy. A virtual applause, please.
Cebu Normal University President, Dr. Filomena T. Dayagbil, the Regional Director of the Commission on Higher Education Region 7, Dr. Maximo C. Aljibe, Chief Education Program Specialist from CHED Region 7, Dr. Josefino Ronquillo, UNESCO Chair in Reorienting Education Towards Sustainability, Professor Charles A. Hopkins, CNU Vice Presidents, Dr. Daisy Palumpon and Dr. Floriza Laplap, College of Teacher Education Dean, Dr. Ethel Abao, and other members of the Administrative Council of the University, the faculty, the presenters, and my dear participants, good morning. It is my great honor and privilege to introduce our keynote speaker for this conference. Our speaker finished his Bachelor of Arts, History, and Doctor of Public Administration degrees from the University of the Philippines and Master of Arts in Social Science degree from De La Salle University. He served as a member or advisor to the Philippine delegations to the 1994 UN Conference on Population and Development held in Cairo, Egypt. In 1995, UN World Summit on Social Development in Copenhagen, 1996 in UN World Food Summit in Rome, and the 2002 UN Special Session on Children in New York. As a political strategist, he has run many political campaigns at the national and local levels and serves as the president of the Association of Political Consultants in Asia. He was a Fulbright Hays visiting scholar at the University of Southern California and the California State University, Sacramento, and a senior Fulbright visiting professor or fellow at the Johns Hopkins University. He served at the Committee on Revenue and Taxation of the California State Legislature and was the first Filipino recipient of a California State Assembly resolution, Resolution number 7, given by the Speaker Willie Brown, commending his work at the California Legislature in 1992. He is an internationally recognized political analyst, an opinion maker whose views are extensively quoted by foreign and local media. As a public intellectual, he simplifies complex studies and explains national issues through his top-rating education program, Turo Turo in DZMM Teleradio, and No Filter on the ABS-CBN News channel. He has spent the past 3 decades in the policy arena in the Philippines and the United States. He served as an executive assistant, chief of staff, senior consultant, and senior advisor to Senate Presidents Aquilino Pimentel Jr. and Coco Pimentel, Senate Presidents pro tempore Sotero Laurel, Leticia Ramos Shahani, and Juan Flavier, and Senators Gregorio Honasan and Ramon Magsaysay Jr. from the 8th to the 16th Congress. He is an academician who has used his technical expertise to help policymakers educate the public and run political campaigns. His areas of policy expertise cover higher education, agriculture, indigenous communities, environment and climate change, good governance, and local government. He is a professor of public administration at the University of the Philippines and served as its vice president for public affairs from 2011 to 2016. Is the advisor of the Philippine Negotiating Panel with the National Democratic Front, Communist Party of the Philippines, New People's Army, and the Commissioner of the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO. Friends, ladies and gentlemen, our keynote speaker, the chairperson of the Commissioner on Higher Education, Dr. J. Prospero De Vera. Since he cannot appear virtually to deliver his message, let me call in the university president to read his message for us. Friends, ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome again the university president, Dr. Filomena T. Dayagbil.
Allow me to share with you the keynote speech of the chair of the Commission on Higher Education, and I read, on behalf of the Commission on Higher Education, or CHED, I would like to congratulate the Cebu Normal University College of Teacher Education as it holds its 7th International or its 8th National Teacher Education Student Conference, or TEStCon, on November 23 to 24, 2020. I commend the Cebu Normal University for conducting this meaningful event with the theme, Making Education Sustainable in the New Normal, in order to gather professionals, students both in the graduate and undergraduate degree programs, and researchers of other regions to share their research findings and experiences. During the pandemic, we continue to affirm complementarity. I ensured that the voice of the higher education institutions is heard in the Interagency Task Force of Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases. I strongly pushed for provisions to ensure that support for displaced faculty and students having difficulties with connectivity are provided. We thank President Rodrigo Roa Duterte and the Congress for listening to our call with provision for funding in Bayanihan 2. During the pandemic, there were also calls for an academic freeze, but we have to recognize the innovations and preparedness of our higher education institutions. Many of those are from your group. We pushed for the opening of classes through flexible learning, allowing for various modes of delivery to complement and reinforce each other, and ensuring that students can continue to learn even during these challenging times. We hope that we will work together to distill best practices as we continue to enhance our policies in response to developments on the ground. Further, as the Commission launched Field CHED Connect, a portal for open educational resources, many private higher education institutions shared their materials and supported the initiative to the great benefit of our students. For fiscal year 2020-2021, we have allotted funding around 100 million for the procurement of course materials, so more of your own designed materials could be shared. With this, I encourage administrators, faculty, researchers, and educators to proactively continue on your endeavor in not only gathering the best in the field and in providing quality education that would result in gained knowledge to safeguard our educational system, but to be more keen in pursuit for innovative, required, and somewhat disruptive process to improve it and to be at par of those globally competitive institutions, and to reflect on how you will tailor your programs or your projects in order to focus on our society's particular problems and obtain the results you seek. It is my hope that we will together continue with the help of our partners and other stakeholders to ensure that access, equity, and excellence permeates not just in the upper crust of our universities and colleges, but even in the smallest municipalities and cities in the country. It is a tall order, but this is our lifetime mission. The Commission on Higher Education under our watch will ensure that policies, programs, and priorities will not disadvantage our higher education institutions as we forge ahead in building a more resilient higher educational system. Every crisis is an opportunity. I invite CNU and the member institutions to work closely with the Commission as we aim to transform Philippine higher education to greater heights of excellence and resilience. Congratulations and mabuhay. Signed, J. Prospero De Vera III, Chairman, Commission on Higher Education.
Thank you very much, Dr. Diagbil. And of course, thank you very much, Dr. Pugoy, for introducing our keynote speaker. At this point, we will be presenting the certificate of recognition to our keynote speaker. And the certificate reads, Cebu Normal University College of Teacher Education, in cooperation with the Institute for Research in Innovative Instructional Delivery, certificate of recognition is awarded to Dr. J. Prospero De Vera III for sharing his expertise as keynote speaker during the 7th International and 8th National Teacher Education Student Conference, or TEStCon, with the theme Making Education Sustainable in the New Normal, held on November 23 to 24, 2020, via Zoom, given this 23rd day of November 2020 at Cebu City, Philippines, signed by Dr. Daisy R. Palumpon, Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Angeline M. Pugoy, Vice President for Research, Extension, and Publication, and Dr. Filomena T. Dayabil, SUC President 3. A virtual applause, please. Thank you very much. All right, I'd also like to acknowledge our participant from Alithia University. Welcome to our conference today. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very much excited to hear the talk of our plenary speaker, due in big part to the fact that he works at UNESCO as the chair in Reorienting Education Towards Sustainability. And to tell us more about him, please welcome the hardworking Dean of the College of Teacher Education of Cebu Normal University. Please help me welcome Dr. Ethel L. Abaw. A virtual applause, please.
Good morning to our highly respected President of the University, Dr. Filomena T. Dayabil, Chair, Commission on Higher Education, Dr. J. Prospero De Vera III, Regional Director, Dr. Maximo C. Aljibe, SHED 7 Chief Education Program Specialist, Dr. Josefino Ronquillo, to our Vice President for Research, Extension, and Publication, Dr. Angeline Pugoy, Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Daisy R. Palumpon, Vice President for Administration, Dr. Floriza Lapla, our Research Director, Dr. Lawrence Garcia, other administrative officials, my dear colleagues in the College of Teacher Education, other stakeholders of the university, participants, guests, good morning. Our first plenary speaker today is a renowned international figure. He holds the UNESCO Chair in Reorienting Education Towards Sustainability at York University, Canada, conducting research on Education for Sustainable Development, ESD, and coordinating 2 research networks. The first network is comprised of teacher education institutions spanning 50 countries, focusing on the SDGs and the Global Education 2030 agenda. The second network, covering 40 countries, which aims to embed sustainability in curricula to improve the education of indigenous youth. Hopkins consults for institutions worldwide, including United Nations agencies, governments, universities, and other education stakeholders. He is the advisor to the UN Universities Institute of Advanced Studies in Sustainable Development and their global network of regional centers of expertise on ESD, and co-director of the Asia Pacific Institute on ESD in Beijing, China. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Professor Charles A. Hopkins.
My name is Charles Hopkins. I'm the UNESCO Chair at York University in Toronto, Canada. But let me begin by thanking the College of Teacher Education there at Cebu Normal University for inviting me to speak and share some ideas at the 7th International Teacher Education Student Conference. Let me put up my my screen, and then we can begin. I'm really intrigued by the theme of making education sustainable in the new normal. When I received that, I thought that I would put a bit of a twist on it. So my approach to the theme will be on bringing sustainability, the concept of sustainability, into education systems in the next normal, and hopefully in a way that sustainability will remain in education through all the following new normals that will be coming our way. So I've entitled it Challenges and Opportunities in the Next Normal, the Role of Education in a Post-COVID-19 Era. Now, the reason I say that, the next normal, is because realistically, there are so many issues that are out there beyond COVID, right? And if we think of it, once COVID is gone, things will be all right. However, the World Economic Forum each year sort of maps where the different crises are as seen by countries from all around the world. So in this chart, in the newest release that has just come out, if you look, you will see the axis of impact, so low impact, high impact if it happens, and across the horizontal axis is the likelihood. Very low likelihood, very high likelihood. So of course we're interested what's up in this corner of high impact and great likelihood. So largely what you find are environmental issues, climate change, biodiversity loss, extreme weather conditions, and so on. And of course the Philippines, that is you. The number of typhoons that come roaring in and hit you it is absolutely amazing. On my trips there to Cebu in the past and in other parts of the Philippines, it is amazing how often you get hit and how low your ecological footprint really is that is creating that kind of change. So we have these risks that are out there, and each risk comes with a web of interrelated facts and so on, so that if we take climate change and we want to look at what are the other aspects that would be involved, everything from the natural disasters, the extreme weather and so on, the biodiversity loss, but you will see with climate action, you also have issues around water crisis, involuntary migration, where people are forced to move, storm surges and so on, sometimes permanently, that people really do need to be relocated because each storm surge is getting larger and the region is uninhabitable. And with that comes social instability and so on. So as I say, just because we think COVID is past, no. We know there's a great long list of issues that are there, as we in the future will be coping with roughly 25% more people and still trying to address poverty, trying to address exclusion, the employment, in decent work and so on, health issues, etc. But what does this really mean then for the education sector? For those of you who are going on to become teachers. Well, let's look at a post-COVID or during COVID and see what really has changed. Is it temporary or permanently in K-12 education? So first of all, we see suddenly what had predicted for years that we needed to move on to online teaching and learning, etc. Well, we now have experience in the possibilities, the limitations, and what really is needed if we're going to bring online teaching and learning into reality. Can this be entirely online? Should it be entirely online, etc.? I'm of an age, and I remember that when televisions were first brought into a classroom, the idea was we would no longer need teachers. We would just put television sets in front of the classroom, and there would be this super teacher who would teach to thousands at a set time, right? Totally unrealistic. But what are the others? The shift in responsibility to the learner. If the child is at home and education is being provided, and there is no one there really shepherding, explaining, making sure that as the lesson evolves, that the person understands and so on. I'll come back to this because it is a very important point, the awareness of mental health and so on. And then we get into the whole idea of assessment. What are we observing? You know, and how are we going to track? Is it the student that is doing it? Is it the parent that is doing it? And so on. These are all important issues, let alone the idea of what is the world of work going to be, and how are we preparing students for the world of work. But not all is lost. I think that what we are doing is that we're realizing that there are some opportunities. First of all, let's that I brought up, the challenges. The challenges are also the opportunities of the future, because these issues are not going away. Yeah? So they are going to be with us, and the economy of the future will largely be built and influenced around these particular issues. So as educators, we need to be thinking of how we can make our learners aware of these, being able to address them, to think them through, how they're interrelated and so on, to prepare them for the world of work. We need to look at the opportunities that are there for educators currently as well. We've realized that change is inevitable. We are not going to go back to the old normal. No, I can't see that. Not that the old normal was that great. We had great inequities in our teaching and graduation outcomes and so on, but I won't go there in this limited time that I have. Well, it was good enough when I went to school, or this is what school really should be, etc., to open and the restart of education into something better. So the possibility of serious change is good. We see the whole thing about planning and scenario planning. Well, if we did this, what should happen? What if we do that? How can we be prepared for suddenly having to shut down school systems and send education home? What can we do for people? Because once students are out of school for any length of time, especially in the developing world, those students could be lost forever because they will be swept into the world of work and just by desperation and so on. So what does this mean then for teacher education? Well, as I say, what we need to do is, are we going to go back to normal and back to where we were, or do we want to actually build back better? And how do we do this? How do we engage society so that we, as educators, can have society backing, collaborating, working with us, and providing the resources? These are very, very important, and especially for teacher education institutions, not only in pre-service, but in-service work that will need to be done. So there are a number of voices that are out there suggesting that in the new change, there are some things that we're missing in the old normal. And I think here are a couple of them. One is Zul Razak there at the International Islamic University of Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. Zul is continually calling for a re-examination of values, the underpinnings of relationships and so on being reconsidered. And if we look at the work of Satish Kumar from India, he feels that what we really need is to examine our whole relationship with the planet, the impact and so on of how we see the world. You know, is it simply a big pot of natural resources for us to take as we wish? So this huge global challenge of how can we create an economy and social systems, etc., that enables individuals and communities to thrive equitably. Equitably is an important component, but at the same time, sustaining the capacity of the environment to support the world for future generations. So the struggle to do this has been going on for quite some time, and right at the end of the Second World War, we thought, okay, how can we come together to try and figure this out? And so we formed the United Nations. In 1987, though, we realized that simply putting a focus on environment wasn't working, and that we needed to have some sort of balance. And how could we address the abject poverty in so many of the former colonies in the developing nations that were there? And so the idea was to balance development with environmental protection. And so the concept of sustainable development was brought forward. By 1992, 5 years after the concept was adapted, a work program was brought forward called Agenda 21. And that lasted until the turn of the millennium, both the turn of the century and coming into 2000, we have the Millennium Development Goals were brought in. In Agenda 21, we had roughly 40 chapters. In the Millennium Development Goals, we had 8 targets, but for developing countries. Now, from 2015 to 2030, the next 15-year period, we have something called the Sustainable Development Goals. So these are global ways of trying to address the progress and the development of the world. These 17 goals, I think probably you're all well aware of, but they go all the way from, and the first one is addressing poverty, second is on hunger, third is health, and the fourth goal is quality education. If you look at the others, you will see clean water, responsible consumption, and the last one is extremely important. It's the idea of partnerships, because countries can't do this alone. It comes all the way down to states and provinces, down to local communities, and then different sectors of society. And one of the most important sectors within society is education. Now, the idea of Sustainable Development Goal 4 on quality education, it has 7 targets that are there, and the first one being completely free quality primary and secondary school. Now, this is a target by 2030. The second one is on early childhood education, and then affordable quality technical, vocational, and tertiary education, and so on. But 4.7 is a very interesting one, and one that I would like to talk about because it is the title of your thought. How do we bring sustainability into education? And this is what is called for by the United Nations and all of the countries around the world. Knowledge and skill for sustainable development. Now, if we take that target and open it up even more, then you will see target 4.7, by 2030, ensure all learners acquire knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including education for sustainable development, and a little further, global citizenship. Okay. So how do we bring that in? So the idea then is we recognize, first of all, the United Nations General Assembly have these 2 aspects. One is the role of education for sustainable development in both schooling and so on, but building public awareness, etc. But it also shows that in all of the 17 goals, we have a need for education, for public awareness, for public understanding, and so on. So it is not just in the classroom, but is building a knowledgeable society. And what is studied, especially as we get up higher in the grades, then we see the need for understanding of water issues and production issues and so on. How do we bring sustainability into manufacturing? So all of these are totally interrelated. So if we take any one issue, for instance, let's take the issue of COVID. Right? You will see that there is a responsibility and a relationship between COVID and each of those 17 goals. Now, we won't go into them in detail, but I just wanted to show the complexity, but at the heart of each one of these, of course, there is that education component. So what changed? Well, I suggest that the original stages of learning will remain, right? So we begin as teachers at the earliest time, that we begin by showing and enjoying learning, right? The joy of actually being there. And then moving on to the next step of exploring, what is there out there to learn? What are the things that I can explore? And then the next step of learning how to acquire knowledge, learning to learn. Where do you find things, and how do I moving on from learning to read to reading to learn. These are wonderful steps. And then from there, where the student starts to develop their own intrigue, their own, what is it that I want to learn? And learning with a purpose that they come up with, that blends into the next step of the student assuming responsibility for their own learning, for their own destiny. This is the heart of the last one, of lifelong learning, of developing beyond learning, not only skills for the jobs and so on, but learning to be human, exploring one's worldviews and so on. So we have that whole list. But education, I think, while this these are the steps that will remain, we do see shift from the traditional foci. So the idea of individual competence and individuality to the common good. COVID has really brought us into examining the world of me and the world of we. My rights, but also my responsibility to others, the wearing of a mask, and so on. The idea of quality then, going beyond excellence in mathematics and language, to also quality including values, ethics, and so on. The idea of vocation, training for 21st century skills for vocation also includes the whole concept of well-being. And there's more to life than simply the world of work. Equity issues that were largely around gender seem to move beyond that into one's whole identity. So equity is still a part, and gender, but also sexuality and a broader component. So, and the idea of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics moving to include the arts and artificial intelligence. The idea of reflection, learning to reflect, and how to make judgments, how to sort out false news or false just ideas that what could be, is that real? Could it be real? How do I check it? How do I sort that out? So if we look at within UNESCO, in 1996, they came forward with the idea of what is the purpose of education? So they came up with 4 big ideas: learning to know, learning to do, learning to be, to become all one can, and learning to live together. And we say that these are kind of shifting now, so that with the Sustainable Development Goals that I just talked about, the impact of that is, from learning to know, is to be aware of the unknown. There's so little that we actually know about the planet and how it works, for instance. And learning to do, well, how to do it ethically. And learning to be, yeah, but that could be self-centered. We're trying to see how can you be, but at the same time ensure equity for others to be as well. And from learning to live together, we move on to learning to live together with others sustainably. Now, we talked about education for sustainable development in 4.7, but also the idea of a global citizenship. So what they're now saying is that we need to address, yes, the 21st century competencies that have been put out by OECD and so on, but we need to, as I say, move beyond just gainful future employment. And how can we bring in the ideas that of these other issues that I mentioned? And so what are the implications in doing this for students, for teachers, for education systems? You know, if you're setting national examinations, which determine what really gets focused on, what gets taught, and so on, and what does it do for for teacher education institutions. So as we're moving, pardon me, touching the controls here. As we think about these changes, UNESCO has also said, look, in 1996, with the Dolores report, that was then. What is now? And so UNESCO is reaching out, trying to figure out what should education look like post-COVID, but even before COVID, they started into this. The wonderful quote from the Director General of UNESCO, when she says, when inequalities deepen, when digital, big data, and artificial intelligence open new perspectives, when cognitive sciences disrupt traditional approaches to learning, then it is crucial to rethink education. And the futures of education, I strongly urge you, especially those of you on the faculty there at Cebu Normal, to go to the UNESCO website and become engaged with the futures of education. It is open. Students can engage, can send in their ideas and so on as to what should it look like. So if we look at the idea of, one of the ideas at any rate that was putting forward was regarding sustainability, was to think of it as a purpose of education, so that it would be embedded in all of the different disciplines, right? and at sort of all grade levels. Now, let me move on to Cebu Normal itself and the whole idea of education and sustainability. And so let's start with a traditional look at the purposes of higher education, the three big ones: teaching, research, and community service. So if we look at teaching and learning, how do we embed into the curriculum? How do we bring sustainability into all of the different grades and subjects and so on? In much the same way as we look at racism or equity and so on, as a way of trying to embed it into the very culture of the school. If we look at the in learning, for instance, transparent assessment mechanisms, how can we bring it in there? If we look at the teaching, again, we need to think of changing the approaches, and it's simply moving from transmission of knowledge into much more into the way of critical thinking, so on. If we think of learning strategies, how do we move from that transmissive and just handing out information, which is an important foundation, but we can't stop there, right? So then we start building into other activities, and then actually looking at transformative learning strategies. So all of this is a way of preparing people for a world in the future, a world of change. Now, we can still do this, but tie it in to our ongoing strategy. It doesn't mean throwing everything out and so on, starting over. No, it is much more one of adaptation, thoughtful adaptation, and building on one's own strengths as a professor, or you as a student teacher, building on your particular strengths. So if we think of education theory that is solid all around the world, the work of Bloom, right? So Bloom came up with 6 different levels of stages of learning and of competence. So the first three were largely learning as acquisition, 2 + 2 = 4, learning the boiling point of water, learning various things that are true, false, etc. Getting that good firm base down there. And then moving from there in analyzing and looking at things, and then finally moving up to stage 5 and 6, where you are actually putting things together, you are synthesizing, you are becoming engaged in working with and seeking things that you really that weren't clear, in creating new knowledge. Now, if we look at it from a chart point of view, if we look at the idea of building resilience and understanding sustainability in new and especially in new and emerging issues. Now, within sustainability, you have issues that are ongoing, and you can find research and knowledge in it. Right? But then you have other issues that are suddenly upon us that we don't know that much about. So if, for instance, at one point, climate change, is it real? Is it not? What is causing it? What could it do, etc.? Now we are much more into that, and we can learn about it. COVID-19 is a classic example of a wicked issue like climate change was. All right? It is one of those issues where we really do not know that much about it and understand the transmission and so on. So if we look at this chart, you will see along the vertical axis, whether or not we can actually measure and assess and so on. And then across the bottom is the certainty of what it is that we're teaching. Okay? So very high certainty, 2 + 2 = 4. Okay? We can measure it, very high. And so this first is Bloom's 1, 2, and 3, that area. And this is where most school systems get stuck. This is where we stay. But if we start to move out into Bloom 4, and then 5 and 6, as we get out, where there really is this great uncertainty. This is the emerging world. This is the world out here where those issues are going to come in this post-COVID-19 world. But we need to learn to be comfortable in teaching out there. How do we measure? How do we assess? How do we actually cope with these kinds of things? So part of dealing, for instance, out in this unknown era, would include questioning our worldviews, learning other worldviews. For instance, the world of indigenous people, their relationship to the world, to the land and the water and the resources and so on. One of my colleagues, Dan Longboat, he's a Haudenosaunee elder here in Canada. And he loves to build on the ancient Chinese proverb about feed a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach him how to fish though and you feed him for his lifetime. And but Dan's take is teach human beings their sacred relationship with fish, and you will have human beings and fish until the end of time. So I think with secondary school students exploring those kinds of so that's all in teaching and learning. But if we want to move on then to research, that other huge role, the idea of research with a purpose, building in values and ethics into research, the idea of aligning work with biomimicry. That, the two Japanese super trains, the one on the left, the pink one, it was designed for very high speed travel out in the open. So that nose of it was specially designed. The train, the gray one, was a high-speed train as well, but its front nose was designed along the lines of the duck-billed platypus. This is a small mammal in Australia that goes through very shallow streams without making any wave or wake. So the purpose of this train is going through tunnels. And so on those runs that have a lot of mountains in Japan, this would be the desired face on the front of it. So that's the idea of working in bringing sustainability into research in the future. And the third one being community service, the idea of youth engagement, modeling sustainability as the institution itself, not only greening the campus to save money and so on, but using the research and the modeling and sort of being out there to support and to help the community. Using your credibility and your knowledge to help the community that is around you to improve their lot in life and to be a support with them. I know in Cebu you have the United Nations University, the Institute for Advanced Studies and Sustainability. You have your members of the Regional Center of Expertise in ESD. And so this kind of role of the university working with the community is so important. Engaging the community as citizen scientists, and so they capture data and so on, bring it in, and then using their collective data to even have the students in the schools in that community analyze the data, build graphs, and teach math, and so on. So those are the kinds of issues of the community service. And then importantly, the idea of not indoctrination, no, education, but giving young people the skills of becoming citizens, right? Of trying to help them. How do you lobby? What are the effective ways of bringing about changes in society? Looking into sociology, psychology, and so on. What can we do to actually bring about these kinds of changes? So all of these collectively, we think of as institutions doing a whole institution approach. The idea of bringing together the stakeholders, that the people in admin and leadership, the faculty, the students themselves, the learners, to come up with a plan or a vision of how to bring sustainability into the institution, to get the technical and also the financial support, sometimes by through all of the energy savings of water, waste management, and so on, provides a stream for funding other changes within the institution. But it's important not to stop at just greening the campus. The whole idea is greening the minds as well, okay? And then using networks to move forward. So by embedding sustainability across the campus, in the research, in the teaching and learning, working in the community, and actually embedding it right into the whole culture, the mission, the vision, the policy, even hiring practices and so on in the institution is what we're talking about in a post-COVID world. Here's very briefly a schematic as I'm closing. The idea of the whole school approach being at the center in here, and then the different components, the faculties, the community, the governance schemes, the curriculum, what gets taught, and also the sort of the culture, the research, those cylinders that I just showed you in working in here, and then developing a strategy to move forward, building the commitment on the part of everyone, including any unions and so on, to be there, and then developing the process and, of course, monitoring, setting targets, moving forward, letting people know, celebrating, and so on. So that's the idea of engaging the other sort of external partners, including the government and school external, whether it's a board of regents or governors or whatever, and then all together the idea of collaboratively learning. So that's the idea of moving forward in the not only in dealing with COVID, but moving forward in this idea of continuous improvement in a whole institution approach. Now, I think all of you are aware of the idea of the ecological footprint. It is the impact that each of us make as we live our lives. It's an idea that came from a professor at University of British Columbia. It is spread, it has grown, and so on. But there is the other side, that hopeful side. When a little girl in grade 4 in India said, when she was being taught about her ecological footprint, and she said, but I have hands. I can do something about them. And so the whole concept of the ecological handprint being the positive side of what we can do as we move forward. This idea has gathered. You'll find it on the internet. You will find it is spread not only in India, but through a large part of Asia. It is spread into Africa and into North America. But the only reason that it spread was because the little girl told her teacher. The teacher was wise enough to understand the power of the imagery. The teacher went to a large non-government organization in India, the Center for Environmental Education. They took the idea, they built upon it, and they took the idea to the government, to the Ministry of Environment, rather, in India. And it stuck and it grew. It wouldn't have gone anywhere. We all have little children in early grades put their hand on the paper, draw around it, paint it, etc. It was the vision of that young teacher who saw something in it. It was the collaboration of the non-government organization, the willingness of the government to work with the NGO. And so that idea of partnerships. Partnerships will be so important in a post-COVID world, a world we can't really see, but one that is coming. I hope you find these remarks useful in your thinking. I've included here a number of useful resources that I'm sure we will figure out a way of sharing with you. And I thank you very, very much for this opportunity to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much, Professor Charles Hopkins. Friends, let's give Professor Hopkins our virtual applause. Sir, thank you very much for giving us a highly substantive, highly informative talk. You know, I really agree that there's a need for us to rethink the focus of education, for us to be able to adapt, thrive, and survive in the next normal. Now, at this point, I will be entertaining 3 questions for Dr. Hopkins. If you have questions, please just kindly type them in the chat box. Meanwhile, I have one question here for Professor Hopkins. Sir, there's a question here that says, what are the activities conducted by UNESCO to initially respond to the needs of education, in particular in the next normal?
Well, thank you very much for the question, and good morning from a snowy Toronto this evening.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah. Yes, UNESCO sort of shepherds the education response to the Sustainable Development Goals. And this past week, they released a 10-year program that goes from 2020 to 2030. It's called ESD for 2030, and it's open and engaging, in particular, faculties of education. You know, there are 60, 70 million teachers around the world, if not more. And if somehow we could engage those teachers in a knowledgeable, thoughtful way, but even the faculties of education, the faculty members there, need help and training in understanding what is it all about and how to embed the basic principles into their particular discipline. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is, how do you bring it all together in that whole institution approach that I mentioned? How in engaging the service staff, engaging the administration, and so on. But if you go into the web, and I left at my last slide where those resources to go to. But if you just Google UNESCO ESD for 2030, you should be able to come up with the game plan. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hopkins, for that. I have here another question, sir. It reads, how can college professors teaching in the different courses or disciplines foster and develop in students optimism and resilience, or life skills and mental health during the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond? Kindly give suggestions or best practices along this line. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think that being hopeful is extremely important. As professors, well, we have to be able to judge at how do we make our classes age appropriate, right? You know, what do we bring into our classes? How can we work at the local level where it's hands-on, where they can do something, make progress, bring about change, and so on? We can't just dump the global issues on local youth. We need to understand that to date, much of what we have been doing has been wrong. We have been building on fear, and the whole environmental movement and so on, so much of it was building on fear. And we need to change that. We need to reach out in learning from advertising, public relations, and so on. That's one way of trying to bring about change. But we need to engage the social sciences. To date, we've been largely in the natural sciences, but we need to engage the social sciences. Why do we do what we do? Why do we think the way we think? And bring these together in a much more unified way. And the last thing that was important when I said, it's not about indoctrination. It is about education, and it is questioning age appropriately what we think, what we understand. Why do we think that way? Is it simply because our parents thought that way? Okay, and learning our way forward. Thanks.
True. Thank you very much, Dr. Hopkins. And I'd like to believe that's where the importance of conducting research, especially in the social sciences, is it's very important. Yeah, it's emphasized. The importance of conducting research is emphasized for us to be able to, yes, look into the social side of these things. So thank you very much, Professor Hopkins, for sharing your time. I'm sorry, there's still one last question here about the pillars. Is learning to transform same as learning to live together with sustainability?
Not. There is a symbiotic relationship, but a transformative education is largely questioning the things that you've always thought were there, and either reaffirming them or changing them. Now, that may or may not happen when you are trying to learn to live together with others. Now, and let me just say, when I say others, it's not necessarily just other humans, right? It's learning to live together with the others, which may be wildlife. It could be plants. It could be all other living things, you know? So that is transformative when you start thinking, well, it's not just about living with another city or another culture, you know, or other Asians, etc. So that would be a transformative way, and learning to live sustainably. Now, learning to live sustainably, for those of us who are homo economists or homo consumptivists or whatever we are, you know, that would be transformative in our worldview of who are we as humans, and what rights do we have over other life forms. You know, these would be those kinds of transformative questions that I think would be very, very interesting. Thank you.
True. Very substantive. Thank you so much, Professor Hopkins.
You're most welcome. And have a great conference.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for gracing your time with us. Let's give him a virtual applause. At this point, we will be presenting Professor Hopkins our certificate of recognition as a gesture of our gratitude, and of course, in recognition of his contribution to the success of TEStCon 2020.
Thank you.
Sir Max. All right. Okay, and the certificate reads, Cebu Normal University College of Teacher Education, in cooperation with the Institute for Research in Innovative Instructional Delivery, certificate of recognition is awarded to Professor Charles A. Hopkins for sharing his expertise as plenary speaker during the 7th International and 8th National Teacher Education Zoom Conference with the theme Making Education Sustainable in the New Normal, held on November 23 to 24, 2020 via Zoom, given this 23rd day of November 2020 at Cebu City, Philippines, signed by Dr. Daisy R. Palumpon, Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Angeline M. Pugoy, Vice President for Research, Extension, and Publication, and Dr. Filomena T. Deagbil, SUC President 3. A virtual applause, please. So once again, thank you very much, Professor Hopkins. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, we will now proceed to our parallel sessions. And I'm so happy that we are very much on time. It's 10 a.m. And then we will be starting now with our parallel sessions or our breakout sessions. As announced, we have today, or for this conference, 6 sessions. And then I'd like to remind everybody to remain your Zoom names using the format session number, space pre if you're a presenter, or par if you're a participant, underscore your complete name. And then at this point, I think we have our session moderators, Sir Max. Can we flash it on the screen for the different session, or for the different sessions? And then for the participants who did not receive the program, actually the link is on our chat box. All right, so here are our breakout sessions. The first session is, this is breakout room 1. Our session moderator will be Dr. Jennifer B. Gonzalez, and co-moderator is Miss Baby Jane Oitico. So these are the studies, the 12 studies that will be presented in that session, or breakout 1. Our next breakout room is moderated by Mr. Jiffy Cabarce and assisted by Miss Anne Carmel Labajo. And here, these are the 12 studies to be presented in that session. We also have our third breakout session moderated by Miss Ruby Perez and assisted by Dr. Charlo M. Iredel. Breakout room 4 is moderated by Mr. Jeromel Enoch and co-moderated by Dr. Melanie Silva. Breakout 5 is moderated by Dr. Tiza Marie Navarro and co-moderated by Mrs. Rosita Lasea. And our breakout room 6 is moderated by Mr. Gino Somalinog and co-moderated by Mr. Alvin Coniado. So I'd like to remind everybody, or to inform everybody, that the breakout rooms are now open. You may now join our breakout rooms. If you do not know where to locate it, you can click on the ellipsis on the lower part of your Zoom screen. If you can see, there are 3 dots, and then there's a word more. You click that and then click join breakout room. So you can now join the breakout rooms you want to join in, so that we can begin with our breakout session. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, I'm Mr. Kim Francis Rodriguez. See you all next time.